And now, a story from the Appleseed.
Now, long ago, before there were even people on the earth, there were the animals. And the animals all lived all in their own separate places, and they had their own governments. All of them did. But after a while, some of their governments started running into each other, and there were difficulties. So they decided that they would bring all representatives from all of the animals, both large and small, and they'd come together to have a conventions. This is, of course, before people and how people got conventions in their own world. And so they came together, everybody sending someone from their own group of government and from each of the large and the small of all the animals. And everyone was gathered there. There were many problems that they needed to discuss. Of things like a bear was sleeping in a cave, and other folks decided to use the front of the cave as a place where they would hold dances. And that didn't go over very well. And there were things like the rabbits and the deer were always having to run from the foxes, and that didn't seem to be right. And then there were just problems upon problems. So when they came together, the first thing they did when they came together was they had to decide on a president, because that was most important. And so they decided that they would choose Lion, because Lion was going to kill them and eat them all. So they chose that he was the best of them. Hippo was none too happy, nor rhinoceros, but they stayed on their own. They stayed calm through all this. The first thing they all decided together was that since the fish had not arrived at the meeting, they were easy for everybody to eat. Everybody could have them. There would be no laws against that. And then they began to talk about what would happen to other folks. They told the deer and the rabbits to run faster, and then they would get away when they could. They told those that would go into the front of the bear's den and they would dance to make sure that they had only the proper times between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. They couldn't be there. And so they began to deal with this issue and this issue, and the animals began to speak up another issue and another issue and another issue. And finally, it was Tiger. Tiger got up there and he started talking. He was talking and talking and talking and talking, and then he wanted to say something with a very big flourish. And so, as a big flourish as he could, he whipped his tail around, and when he whipped his tail around, it wiped off one of the crawfish, little bitty crawfish. And it wiped off a little crawfish off a stone, and that crawfish went running through the air and down on the ground, and died. Yes, it did. Oh, you all are so kind to that crawfish. He'd be most appreciative. Well, the delegation of crawfish came together, and they wrote a proclamation that they were going to say to all of the other animals. And so the lead crawfish got up on that same stone and said, "We, the people, we, those of us who are the crawfish, the smallest of all that are here to say that our voice must be heard. We will be heard. We will be heard." And no one heard a thing. It was like whistling old Dan Tucker in the middle of a hurricane. No one heard that small little voice. "We will be heard. We will be heard." No one heard that. And by this time, Elephant was talking, and he was talking and talking and talking. And in order to make a point, as the sweat was coming down him, he lifted up his foot and right on that proclamation and the crawfish. And a bit of the spring lizard's tail. Well, now, it was not just the crawfish, but all the little small things. They gathered together, the little tiny turtles, those little lizards that come around and bother you all the time, and those other little things that were there, even the little green snake. I don't mind snakes, but that green snake is... But that little green snake, they all came together, and they put together a proclamation. And one of the dwindling crawfish delegation rose again on that step and said, "All of us, we, the smallest of all things, come forward to be heard, for we have the right to speak, the right to be seen, and we will be heard. We will be heard. We will be heard." Another foot by the elephant. It was a horrible day. Well, that is when the smallest began to take things into their own hands. They did not speak up again. They began to bore down into the ground, further and further and further and further and further down into the ground until they got to those ground waters. And then they went to the side. And those ground waters whooshed all the way up to the very top. Just whooshed up to the very top. And all the water came up and it went under each of those large animals. You should have seen Elephant. He had a whole thing of water underneath him. Boom, da 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 boom. Yes, he was up there in the air, and all that water covered the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. And all the animals were treading water. Well, when finally that water went down, they gathered everybody together again for convention. But this time, they ensured that all the animals could speak and all would be heard, both large and small.
Thanks for joining us for a story from the Appleseed.